Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends. We have been meeting regularly at the end of each year. This year, quite recently, I've delivered my address to the Parliament, and I do not know what else I can say except what has already been said there, because all the key points were formulated there, but still, I believe there must be some questions which need additional clarification by us. When I say by us, I'm speaking about me and my colleagues in the administration and in the government of the Russian Federation. So I believe that we could skip the long monologues and begin with the questions, not to lose our time. You're welcome. You know, last year there was a good tradition to begin with the question of one of the most experienced participants of the Kremlin pool, Mr. Terehov, but we have another experienced person here, Alexander Gamov from Komsomolskaya Pravda, and I'd like to give him the opportunity to ask the first question. You have the floor. Thank you very much. First of all, to you, Mr. President, for the 11th press conference in this format. My question is as follows. Before I was going here, I read the transcript of the last year's conference, and there we discussed the difficult situation in the economy of Russia. And when Vyacheslav Terehov and other guys asked you how long we will be finding the solution to this difficult situation, you said that in the worst scenario, we will need about 2 years for that. These were your words, if you remember them. And now I have analyzed it. That meant the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. Could you tell me, at the moment, does your mood about this, your mood about this changed? Because there is a very difficult situation in the country, which you know better than us. And what are your further forecasts? Well, I forgot to introduce myself, Alexander Gamov, the Komsomolskaya Pravda radio site and newspaper. Thank you. Well, let us begin by me telling you an old joke. Two friends meet each other and one asks, "How are you?" The other says, "The strip's white and black, and now which the strip is there? Black." Half a year later they meet again. "How are you?" The black strip again. "But then you had the black one." "No, it turned out that then it was the white strip, now it is black." And that's the similar situation now. When last year we spoke about our plans and how we are going to move forward to overcome this crisis, what were the prospects, etc., we, having known about huge dependence of our economy on the foreign economic factors, mainly on the prices on the traditional export goods, oil and gas, and their chemical goods and fertilizers, also goods which are produced from oil and gas. And we were driven by the idea that the average oil price for the Brent would be $100 per barrel. That was the situation for the beginning of 2014, and guided by this figure we counted the macroeconomic parameters, expenditures, incomes, support of the social sphere, support of economy, etc., and the Ministry of Economic Development was basing on these parameters in developing its development plans. At the end of this year, we had to recalculate. Even last year we had to recalculate because the price has fallen twofold. It used to be $100 per barrel, it became $50 per barrel. We have counted the next year's budget guided by this figure, which is a very optimistic one today, $50 per barrel, because currently the oil price is $38 per barrel. Thus, we'll have to make some more adjustments as well. But still, I'd like to use your question to show from where we moved and where we came. Yes, after this downfall of prices on our main energy resources, all our parameters shifted. What are they now? The GDP has fallen by 3.7%. As of the 7th of December, the inflation was 12.3%. I believe it's very important because there will be other questions about the prospects of our development, with the current situation in the Russian economy, etc. And in order to understand all that, we must know these figures and base our discussions on them. The real income of population have decreased. The investment into the main capital for the 10 previous months have decreased by 5.7%, sorry. But at the same time, which we have mentioned, the data, the statistics show that the Russian economy has passed the crisis on the whole. Well, the peak of the crisis, not the crisis as such, but the peak of it. Since the second quarter of this year, we see the signs of stabilization of business activity. Why can we make draw such conclusion? The growth of the GDP in September and November, the growth of it was 0.3, 0.1%. As compared with the previous months. And since May, the reduction of production of industrial goods has stopped, and we've seen the growth in the industrial production, 0.2, 0.1%. By the way, the Far East, we have seen the 3.1 growth in the Far East. We see positive dynamics in the agriculture with a growth of no less than 3%, which shows that we are doing everything correctly and timely in supporting our agriculture. And the grain harvest for the second year running has been more than 100 million tons. That is 103.4 million tons. That is a good parameter, and I'd like to use this occasion to thank our agricultural farmers for their work. The labor market is sustainable as well. The unemployment level fluctuates between at the figure of about 5.6%. If we remember 2008, we see that this is the positive result of the government's work. There is also the trade balance surplus. Our turnover figures have fallen, but the the trade balance surplus remains. It is $126.3 billion, which is a serious figure. The international reserves are $364.4 billion. They have decreased a little bit, but it is still a sum. The foreign debt of the Russian Federation has decreased by 13%, and the outflow of capital was reduced. Moreover, in the third quarter of this year, we have received the net inflow of capital. As far as the debt burden reduction is concerned, it is very important, and we've seen a lot of positive indicators there. That is the other side of the medal of sanctions. Of course, it would be great if we had some opportunities to go into the foreign refinancing markets, which would help our economy. But on the other hand, over-loaning is a bad sign as well. So, despite all the limitations, we have fully used and fulfilled our obligations before our partners, including our obligations to the international loan organizations. We pay all our debts in time and in full. And the total cumulative debt, that's not the public debt, that's the total debt. I mean the debt of our financial institutions and the real economy sector enterprises has gone down, which is positive. And as I said, the net inflow of capital is there, which is again a positive indicator. I'm confident, and the experts say this, that this shows that investors do understand the reality of our economy and begin to show interest to working here. Despite the difficult situation, the fuel and energy complex is developing. The extraction of oil, coal, power, electric power has increased. We will put in operation more than 4.6 gigawatts of the generating capacities. That is more than last. That is not quite more than last year, but it is a good parameter. And in the forthcoming years, such growth rates will be maintained, which is very important too, because that testifies about the growing opportunities of the economy. The infrastructure is being developed actively. All the seaport infrastructure of Russia has received the increase in capacity in 19.5 billion tons. By the way, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that in January to September, the amount of the loading of cargoes in the ports has grown by 3%. The budget income from our export goods have decreased because of the cost, but as we see that the turnover in ports is growing, in ports, that means that the physical volume has not decreased, but has grown, which is a really positive trend. We continue to develop our airport system. For the last 9 years, the airport served more than 126 million passengers, which is 2.5% more than last year. The domestic flights volume has grown by more than 16%. And despite the difficult financial and economic situation, we still continue to perform responsible policy in state finance.
Over the last 11 months, the federal budget revenue is 12.3 trillion rubles, and the deficit of the budget is 957 billion rubles. At the end year, the deficit is going to amount to 2.8% of the GDP, which is quite a good indicator for the current situation in the economy. In order to ensure that the federal budget is balanced, this year we've resorted to the funds from the Federal Reserve Fund. At the same time, and that is very important, the sovereign funds as of now are at a satisfactory level. 11.8% of the GDP. The reserve fund is 3,931 billion rubles. That is 5.3% of the GDP. And the national welfare fund is 4,777 billion rubles. That is 6.5% of the GDP. We performed all our social obligations this year, and we are witnessing a natural increase in the Russian population. That is a very good indicator that speaks of the mood of the people. They are able to plan their future, the development of their families, and I'm very gladdened by this fact. For the overall duration of the maternity capital program, 6.5 million Russian families have received this maternity capital. As you're aware, we've prolonged the maternity capital program. Let me remind you that in 2016, the maternity capital is going to stay at the 2015 level, that is 453,000 rubles. Most regions have managed to address the issues of preschool education availability around 97%. The life expectancy this year is going to be more than 71 years, according to the data of the Russian Statistics Service. We also have performed our obligations with regards to adjusting the pensions based on the real inflation. Insurance pensions have been increased by 11.5% since April the 1st. Social pensions have been increased by 10.8%. 5%. And you started your question by asking me about what was happening last year, what we're expecting in the near future and in 2016. Well, based on our exports and the terms of its price, the government is seeking to achieve a 0.7% growth in 2016. The growth in 2017 is going to be 1.9 and 2.4% in 2018. Let me draw your attention to the following facts. All this is calculated, assuming that the oil price is at $50, but the volatility is very high, the prices are lower. We're not going to be hasty about recalculating, recomputing, about making adjustments to the budget, because it might entail less financing for social security system. But certainly the government is preparing scenarios for all kinds of developments. This is a tool which is at the disposal of the government. The government has to be prepared for any scenario. But certainly we have some potential for GDP growth, and that is not just confined to our exports. I already said that in my federal address. I was speaking about import substitution. This is not a magic wand, but that means that our agriculture, our industry have to be refurbished, modernized, technically as well, and this also will imply a greater labor productivity. We will certainly have to continue our work in cutting the red tape and making our economic management more efficient. Better conditions will have to be created for business activities. Entrepreneurs will have to be supported in addressing those challenges that are facing them. That is the track which we're going to pursue. That is what we're going to concentrate our attention on. That has helped me, and that has allowed me to use the materials I have. We are going to get questions from the Kremlin pool. RIA Novosti, please. Thank you. Yelena Glushikova, RIA Novosti. Mr. President, you said that the peak of the crisis is behind us, and yet the economic situation is very preoccupying. Mr. Kudrin and other allies of yours are calling for reforms, but Kudrin is an optimist. This week, your ombudsman, Boris Titov, Rights Commissioner for the Rights of Entrepreneurs, said that the key rate of the central bank is too high, and that's why entrepreneurs can neither take loans abroad nor here, because the key rate in Russia is too much. If the situation persists, we're going to turn into a new Venezuela, where the currency rates are absolutely different in the black market and in the official market. Do you share these concerns? Do you support the policy the central bank is pursuing? Do you think we need a lower key rate? Thank you. Thank you. A round of applause for your question. Yes, please. Naturally, that is a concern to everyone, and certainly everyone wants the key rate, the refinancing rate of the central bank to be lowered, because that is what the commercial banks are looking to when they give loans to the participants of the economic activity. But that is not the only factor which affects the interest rates in the commercial sector, albeit an important one. Boris Titov is doing the right thing. Yes, he is advocating the interests of the business community, and that is very important that we should have such an institution, such people. Back then I established this institution because I wanted to listen to different kinds of opinions, because I didn't want to be lost in the sea of daily affairs and not lose sight of important things. In response to your question, I support the policy of the central bank and the government with regard to ensuring the macroeconomic stability. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, However much we want to lower the key rate, this cannot be done via administrative means. Our decision has to be based on the realities of our economy, on its structure. I often hear it that abroad key rates are less, they're lower. Yes, certainly they are doing that on purpose, but they have different problems. The structure of their economies is absolutely different. They are afraid of deflation, whereas we are trying to curb inflation. They produce goods and they cannot sell it, and we have absolutely different problem. In order to bring the key rate down, we do not have to reprimand the central bank. That's what they used to do in the USSR. We have to help the government and the central bank to curb inflation and to bring down inflationary risks and expectations. Should we succeed, then naturally, via natural means, based on the market factors, the refinancing rate of the central bank is going to go down. Wherever possible to support the real sector of the economy, the central bank is doing that, but we cannot push the central bank towards even more drastic steps. There are different factors. There are different problems. But if we are too eager, then we might jeopardize the priority the central bank is pursuing. The central bank has to ensure the viability of the banking sector, the financial system of the country. That is what the central bank is doing. The central bank is working together with the government, for example, pursuing the so-called project financing programs. In other words, there are certain projects worth tens of billions of dollars, 250 or even 500 billions, and banks provide loans to our commercial institutions. And later, these banks fund concrete projects. It is also related to investment projects. The central bank is also participating in those. So the central bank has a toolkit, a whole gamut of tools, and I believe, as of now, they are sufficient. Thank you. Let's go on. ITER TASS, please. The TASS agency. The TASS agency, Veronika Romanenkova. Could you be frank, Mr. President? Are you satisfied with how the government is performing? How adequate are the actions that the government is taking in the crisis situation that you've spoken about? Are we to expect any reshuffling in the government? Here, you know, over quite some time, you, I believe, have had a chance to see that I'm very cautious. I care for people and about people. That's the first thing. And secondly, I believe that all those reshufflings, adjustments, very often, not always, but often, might be negative because all those reshufflings are just hampering our work. And if there is anyone who is failing in their job, I'm partly responsible for that. I'm to a certain extent to be blamed for that. So there is no serious reshuffling to be expected. Indeed, together with the government, we're thinking on how the structure can be improved, how the government work can be made more efficient with regard to the most important economic sectors, social sectors. We have some plans, nothing dramatic, nothing related to individuals. It is all because we wish to improve the work of this most important tool of management. On the whole, I believe they are performing satisfactorily. Certainly, they can and should work better. Just have a look. At the end of the last year, an anti-crisis plan was drafted. It started to be implemented. I don't remember how it was named. The analysis of everything that has been done says that 35%, more than one-third of the measures enshrined in that document failed to be implemented. And that says to us that ministries, different government agencies have not been doing enough yet to swiftly respond to the challenges that are before us, and at a high level to boot. But strategically, the government is moving in the right direction and doing quite efficiently. Anton, oh yes, I'm sorry. Let's give the floor to the Tatars. They have a great placard. We cannot do without Tatars. Thank you. My name is Yelena Kaligapita. I'm from the business newspaper of Tatarstan. The people of Tatarstan will not forgive me if I do not ask you the following questions. In your federal address, you emphasized that we cannot say that the leadership of Turkey and the good people of Turkey are not tantamount to each other. Over the last years, we've managed to foster solid cultural and economic ties with Turkey. What are we to do now? Do we have to sever the ties to the Turk world? Because that's the analysis of the recent cable telegram of Medinsky. What are we to do about Turkish investors who invested heavily into Tatarstan? That's the first question I wanted to ask you. And the second question is as follows. Starting January the 1st, 2016, Rustam Minnihanov, president of Tatarstan, will have to cease to be called president according to the federal law. That might deal a blow to the national sentiment of all Tatars all across the world. And you personally, let me remind you, have always said that that is an internal affair of the Republic, namely how to call the head of the Republic. So is the Federal Center going to insist that the title be renamed? Thank you.
And here also I've seen the plate named Turkey, so let's please go on in order to answer both questions at a time. Please, the floor is yours. Well, all of you can ask questions. We're trying to answer all of them. And adult agency, I have a similar question, and I wanted to start it with the fact that in your federal address, you said that we not equal the Turkish people to the part of the Turkish elite, which is directly responsible for the deaths of our military in Syria. However, at the grassroots level, there's a different impression. There are lots of claims from students to the Turkish embassy in Moscow because they were retired and laid off by businessmen who threatened them with being deported. How are we to fight that? The second question is about Syria and the position regarding the fate of the Syrian president. It is well known Russia insists that it is up to the Syrian people to decide, whereas the United States and its allies believe that he has no political future. Have you discussed this question with John Kerry when he visited you in Moscow, and will this question be raised in New York? And then your question, please. Vlad Safarov, Turkish Information Agency, Ceyhan. The destruction of relations between Russia and Turkey is so swift, and it will not benefit any of the countries. It will be of huge damage for both countries. What is your position? Is there any third stakeholder in this scenario? And the second question, the Islamic anti-ISIL association has been established recently, but there is a NATO coalition, there is a Russian coalition, so there's going to be 3 coalitions against ISIL. Is it that difficult to destroy this evil? Maybe there are some other plans behind that. Maybe there is a hidden agenda, and maybe it's not the ISIL that is the problem. Well, Well, the answer to the Syrian issue would be the latest one. Let me start with the conflict that has emerged. Well, we believe that the actions of the Turkish authorities against our aircraft that was downed, this is a hostile act rather than friendly one. Our military aircraft was downed. People were killed. What was particularly outrageous is that had it been an accident, as we later heard from the Turkish authorities, because for them, they keep saying they didn't know that it was the Russian aircraft. So what would you do in these circumstances? People died. Immediately, people should contact these people and present their apologies. Instead of that, they went to the NATO, insisting that they're being bullied. They started covering itself up by NATO. And then it turned out that NATO had nothing to do with that as well. But the most important I want you to understand, I want everyone to hear that in Turkey, in Russia, everywhere. In addition to the fact that actually a tragedy occurred and people were killed, the thing that outraged us most is that we did not renounce cooperation. When I was in Antalya, I mentioned this issue, and the Turkish colleagues raised a very sensitive issue, asked for support. I'm not going to go into details right now, because that's not how I do actual business. But please, trust me, very sensitive issues, sensitive for Turkey, were raised, which are not fitting the frames of the international law. I'm referring to the decisions that were offered for Turkey. And we said, yes, we understand everything and we are ready to help you. So, regarding so-called Turkomans, I haven't heard of them. Well, I know that there are Turkmens in Turkmenistan. No one told us anything about that. But at the same time, we showed them that we were ready to cooperate on a very sensitive issues for Turkey. Wasn't it that hard to use existing cooperation channels, use military channels that were established, saying that, yes, we mentioned some parts of the border which we haven't discussed before, but there are some other parts that shouldn't be hit by us. No one told us anything. No one warned us in ahead, bearing in mind that we expressed our readiness to cooperate with Turkey on the most sensitive issues. And what was the result? Do they really think that we would shun away from there? Well, Russia is not a country like that. We increased our presence there. We amassed our combat aviation there. There were no air defense systems, actually, from Russia. But right now we have deployed S-400 systems there. We are putting in a combat position the air defense systems of Syria. We deployed Buk systems there. If Turkey was violating airspace of Syria on a regular basis, now I don't think they would be able to do that. Maybe they might try. Well, then you ask, maybe there is the third party involved in this. Well, I got it, what you are hinting at, but we are not aware of that. If someone in the Turkish government decided to kowtow to the Americans, I don't know whether they were right to do that. I don't know whether Americans might actually need that. One could imagine that at some level there were agreements reached that they were going to down the Russian aircraft and then they will turn a blind eye and Turkey would get into the territory of Iraq and occupy some parts of its territories. I don't know, maybe there was such a bargaining tool discussed. I don't know, but they put everyone in a very difficult situation. Well, right now I'm trying to analyze everything that has happened and that is happening. I believe right now that the ISIL is a secondary thing. These are my own assessments. Well, back then, Iraq was invaded and destroyed. For good or for worse, it doesn't matter. But the vacuum emerged. Then elements popped up that had to do with trading in oil. And that situation was actually developing for years. The whole business was established there, smuggling, which is in huge scopes. And in order to protect these smuggling activities and illegal exports, one might need a military force. And it is very convenient to use the Islamic factor to bring gun fodder there under the Islamic slogans. But actually, those people are playing the game that has to do with protecting economic interests. So that's how actually ISIL emerged, as far as I think. Now, the supply routes have to be guaranteed. We started attacking oil convoys. And right now we see they're scared and they are moving in the night time using 10 or 15 trucks. Although most of the supplies is now going on through Iraq and through the Iraqi Kurdistan. I'm asking the defense minister to demonstrate everything with their evidence. Although 11,000 oil trucks were tracked at one location, that is just horrible. So whether there is a third party involved in this process, I don't know. It might be. They might have not coordinated it with anyone, but right now the Turkish authorities are speaking about the Islamization of the country. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but I must admit that the Turkish current leadership decided to demonstrate to the Americans and to everyone that, yes, indeed, we are Islamizing the country, but we are civilized, modern Islamists. Well, once Reagan spoke about samosa, he's a thug, but he's ours. Please bear that in mind. He's an Islamist, but he's ours. Maybe there is something like that behind that, but definitely nothing good have we gained from it. And if there were any goals on the Turkish side, they were not achieved. They deteriorated the situation even further. Now, about our Turkish-speaking peoples, naturally, we need to continue fostering ties with close to us ethnicities. Well, because Turkish-speaking peoples of Russia, they're actually part of Russia. And in this sense, the Turkish people, which I classified as a friendly people in my address, together with many other peoples, have always been our friends and partners, and will continue to be like that, and we should continue having contacts with them. The practice has shown that it's very difficult to come to an agreement with the current Turkish authorities. It is almost impossible. Even when we say that, yes, we agree to that, they're making stabs in our back, due to very actually unclear reasons. That is why I do not see any prospects to recover relations with the Turkish leadership at the highest level. Whereas you could continue cooperating at the humanitarian level, although, yes, indeed, there are lots of problems, and the Turkish leadership has achieved even more than it expected. We will have to introduce restrictions in the economic sphere and many other areas. For example, it has to do with tourism. This crippling Islamization, which would raise hair on the head of the Ataturk, it is having a negative impact on us. Well, in Turkey, there are fighters who originate from the North Caucasus. And on many occasions we had mentioned, that's not how we actually treat our Turkish partners. Nevertheless, our fighters are still there, they have some rest there, and then they use their passport to get into our country, then we have to chase them in our mountainous regions and everywhere as terrorists. That is why we would have to introduce restrictions and some other steps that would ensure and guarantee our national security. Now, about the president of Tatarstan. Well, as we say in our country, you can name him any way you want. The most important thing is not to put him in danger or in some uncomfortable position. The same holds true of the president of Tatarstan. I don't think it would be that sensitive of an issue that would affect and get it to his personal feelings. I know that the peoples of the Caucasus are very sensitive about their pride. Even Chechnya said no. Still, there should be one president in a country, in our country. But back then, there was the choice of the Chechen people, and we would respect the position of the peoples of Tatarstan. So it is up to you to decide. The first channel, Anton Vernitsky, maybe we might give the floor to him as well. Anton Vernitsky, oh, my pardon, I forgot to answer your question. I put it down, and the fate of the Syrian president, I've mentioned it on many occasions. Let me reiterate once again. Never will we agree to any external forces anywhere to impose on who is to govern a country, any country. It goes beyond any common sense and the norms of international law. Naturally, we discussed this issue with the Secretary of State, Mr. Kerry. Our position remains unchanged. We believe that it is only up to the Syrian people to decide who they are to be governed by, and they should define the standards and rules of this process. An important thing to say is that we support the initiative of the United States, including the proposal regarding the development of draft resolution of the UN Security Council. And this resolution was conveyed to us by Secretary of State, Mr. Kerry. I believe we could support that, and I believe it would be satisfactory for the Syrian authorities as well.
They might dislike something about the attempt to solve the conflict that has been going on for a long time, a legal conflict. A compromise is always possible, but there should be compromises on both sides. But we believe that in general these proposals are acceptable, although there is still work to be done. But let me repeat, this is the initiative proposed by the US, by President Obama, and it shows that both the US and Europe are greatly interested in what's going on in the Middle East, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, and we will support the resolution of this crisis, and we will seek the solution that would be acceptable for both sides, no matter how complicated the situation might look. That is the way how we should do this. Our joint work to prepare a constitution, a mechanism, a control mechanism should be set up for future elections that are possible in the future. There should be a transparent mechanism who everyone will have trust in, and based on this democratic procedure, Syria will have to determine on its own which governance is the best for the country and who should govern the country. To follow up on Syria, Mr. Putin, is there a clear plan on Syria? Do we have a clear plan on Syria, or are we acting? So you see that Turkey has shot down our Russian aircraft, and we have increased our presence in Syria. So what would be the final point of our military operation in the Syrian airspace? And do you believe that it is possible to bring the Syrian conflict into the political field? Is it possible? I've been just trying to give an answer to that question. We believe that A, it is possible. B, we think that there is no other way to resolve this situation. This will have to be done sooner or later, and it's better to do it earlier. Sooner than later, there will be less victims and costs, there will be less threats, including for Europe, for the US. Because, 14 people were killed in the US. ISIL has managed to reach the US, and the US authorities have recognized that it was a terrorist act. So ISIL is posing a threat to everyone. So the sooner we do this, the sooner we settle the conflict, the better. Let me repeat, there is no way to solve this issue except for the political one. Do we have a plan? Yes, we do have a plan. I've just laid it out. And in principle, this plan matches in its key ideas the US proposed vision. Joint work on constitution, creating control instruments for future early elections, the elections themselves, and recognition of the results of those elections based on this political process. It is a complicated thing to do. There are mutual complaints. Someone likes one group, others like the other group. Some want to work with the Syrian government, others reject to cooperate with them. But all the opposing sides should move forward towards each other. And what about the military operation? We said long ago that we'll be launching our airstrikes and we'll be supporting the offensive movement of the Syrian army. And we'll be doing it as far as the Syrian army is carrying out these operations. And by the way, I've mentioned it publicly recently. It was François Hollande's idea to try to unite the efforts of the Syrian army and at least of the part of the armed opposition to fight ISIL. And we partially managed to do so. We've managed to find some context with people who are the so-called opposition, the intolerable opposition, armed opposition in Syria, who want to fight ISIL and who are doing this in practice. We support their efforts aimed at fighting ISIL with the airstrikes of the Russian aviation, as we do so when supporting the Syrian army. And when we see that this process of approximation has started, and when we see that the Syrian army, that the Syrian leadership believes that the time has come to stop shooting and to start negotiating, from this moment on, we are not going to be more Syrians than the Syrians themselves. The sooner, the better. Mr. Brylov, would you like to add something? Would you like to follow up on the question? Thank you. Yes, I would like to add to what's been said by my colleagues from Turkey and by Anton. Mr. Putin, first, is it over? Is the game over with Turks? Is there anything that Erdogan could do to change the situation? The second is being more Syrian than a Syrian is a necessary thing, but involvement of the Russian contingent in the attacks, maybe these base in Latakia should stay there. I don't want to answer instead of other people, instead of other heads of state. If they believe that it is possible and necessary to do something, let them do it. But we do not see any need in doing this. This is the first thing. The second thing about the base, the military base. We have different approaches. Some think in Europe, in the US, we've heard this many times, that your interest will be accounted for. If you want your military base, will stay there. I don't know. I'm not sure whether we do need a base there. What is a base, after all? It is infrastructure. Money should be invested into this infrastructure. What is the case now? We do have aviation there. We have modules, temporary modules for recreation, for food. We can actually pick all these things up and leave in 2 days, but a base is a totally different story. Some people think even in Russia that we do need a base, but I'm not so sure about this. And why is that? I've been talking to my EU colleagues. They told me, yes, we know. Probably you do have some such ideas. Why? What for? To keep everything under control? Why do we need to keep everything under control there? It's an important question. We've demonstrated that we did not used to have medium-range missiles. We've eliminated almost all of them. We only used to have them on the ground. The Americans have also destroyed what they had on the ground, the Pershings, but Tomahawks on the sea and on aviation carriers are still there, but we do not have them. But now we do. 1,500 kilometers, the first one, and the second is for airplanes. 4,500. Why do we need a base there after all? If we need to reach someone, we will reach them. Maybe it makes some sense. But we need to think carefully. Maybe we need some temporary basing facility there. But we do not want to go too deep into this situation. I think there is no special need for this. Colleagues, let's respect each other and ask only one question at a time so that everyone could have an opportunity to ask a question. I'm sorry. I would like to ask Ukraine, our sister republic. I keep repeating it all the time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask you a question. Although we're not Turks, we are Ukrainians. Yes, I am well aware of that. Mr. Putin, regarding what's been said by you many times that there are no Russian troops in Donbass, in the context of your statements that in Donbass there are no military personnel in Russia, I would like to say to send regards to you from Captain Yerofeev and from Mr. Alexander. Would you exchange them for Savchenko, Afanasyev, Kolchenko, Klycha? And this is a very extensive list. And the second question, if I may, the Minsk agreements are about to expire. Neither side is implementing them. That is to follow up on my first question. So what do we expect from you from the 1st of January 2016? Are you going to attack once again? Will you propose negotiations, or will you forget about Ukraine for some time? Regarding the exchanges, we've never said that there are no people there who are dealing with some kind of issues, including in the military field, but it does not mean that regular Russian military forces are present there. Feel the difference. The second, you've mentioned 2 or 3 people or 2 people who you propose to exchange. Then you've started a long list of people who you want to exchange them for. First of all, there should be an equal exchange. And second is that together with our colleagues, we should negotiate it and discuss it in a calm manner and continue doing what we've always been insisting upon and what is being proposed by the President of Ukraine. We need to liberate people who are being captured by both sides. And first of all, it has to do with people from Donbass, southeast of Ukraine, and Ukrainian military who are in these territories. But this should be an equal exchange. What am I talking about? It is an open secret that Ukrainian authorities believe that those who have been detained and who are in Donbass, they consider them people subject to exchange, but those who are kept in prisons in Ukraine, in Kiev, are considered criminals. And they are beyond this exchange. This is what people in Donbass disagree with. There should be an honest approach when you exchange all for all, as Petro Poroshenko proposed. We should exchange all for all, without any choices. But this is the approach that we do support. We have a lot of differences with the Ukrainian authorities, but we have a common position in this regard. Now, as for the January the 1st, on the 1st of January, unfortunately for us, we see that we focus that our economic relations will deteriorate because we have to make the decision that we will not work with Ukraine from the 1st of January as with a member of the free trade area of the CIS. And the EU heads offered me, they asked me not to expel Ukraine from the free trade area and not to deprive it of the trade preferences, hoping that in the trilateral format of Russia, EU and Ukraine will negotiate during a year and will make some amendments in various forms. If we are not going to change the very agreement itself between Russia and Ukraine on accession to the association with the EU, we will at least be able to make some adjustments with the help of additional protocols that will alleviate our concerns and will provide for our economic interests. Until July, we've asked them on multiple occasions to meet with us in a trilateral form, and the first contacts began in July only. Yes, I see you, lady. I will give the floor to you. Our contacts began in July, but they brought no result. We've just met in Paris. We've met Chancellor Merkel. We've met the head of the European Commission. They've sent us a paper. Availing myself of this opportunity, let me say a few words. What are we talking about? We've tried to preserve our relations, our economic relations with Ukraine, but Ukraine is a member of the free trade area. There are some mutual preferences. There are zero tariffs. Ukraine has used in its economic relations with Russia and other CIS countries technical standards, customs regulations and rules that we've inherited from the past and that we keep changing together.
Ukraine unilaterally is pulling out of this regime and is joining all the European rules. For example, it is lined out that all goods in the Ukrainian markets must comply with the technical standards and the new regulations of the EU. But our goods are not yet in compliance with these regulations. You should understand this. So you're throwing away our goods from your market? It was written down. Ukraine has the right for some time to leave all goods on its market. So it is not obliged, but it has the right. Will the Ukraine do that or not? It is not clear. So for that, maybe a sub-commission will be created, and it can also not be created. So what do they demand from us? So they want us to leave all the preferential treatment agreements. That's not the way it is done. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that. Russia must bring the goods and customs standards in compliance with the EU rules and the CIS rules as well. Are we talking grown-up business here? Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan used to argue about these custom rules for a long time, and now you want us to join the EU after the Ukraine has joined the EU agreement. Now we have to change our rules as well. That is not fair. It is impossible to do in 1 year. And now they say that we must make a transition to phytosanitary norms of the EU. So Ukraine is ready to do that, but we were not negotiated with, and it is clearly written down that Russia must take such obligations on. Maybe we are for that, but it takes time, and it takes investments as well. We're talking about tens, hundreds, millions of dollars, and we need time. Well, in Paris, I was told that our standards are better. Maybe you should transition to those standards. Yes, that is true. And we want to do that. But we need money. We need investment. And now we have problems with access to foreign markets. You know that it is impossible. Why are you writing this? We did not read what is written yet, that's what they say. So you didn't read it, but you sent it as an official paper to us, so we have to agree with it? Now, as for what are we going to do, we're not going to introduce any sanctions against Ukraine. I want this to be heard. We're moving on to the most preferential nation treatment in trade. So Ukraine will not be in any worse condition as our other trade partners. However, Ukraine will not be subject with any preferences since the 1st of January 2016. What does it mean in reality? Now there is a zero tariff in our bilateral trade. Now the medium tariff will be around 6%, maybe 3, maybe 8, it depends on the sphere. We used to fight against this. We tried to prevent it. However, we were not heard, and it was very unilateral. And just as I explained it, that was the manner. We'll continue to work using the conditions which are happening right now. As for the rest of your question, we're not interested in the deterioration of the conflict. Vice versa, we want this conflict to be settled as soon as possible. However, without the physical elimination of people in the east, in the southeast of the Ukraine. By the way, take a look at the municipal elections results and take a look at the results in the southeast. I think in the 9 or 10 regions, the oppositional bloc took the first place. And in Donbass and Lugansk, regions controlled by the Ukrainian government, 43% used to vote for the opposition bloc. So Kiev doesn't want to see that. They don't want to consider the atmosphere and the expectations of their own people. We really expect to have an open, honest dialogue. As for the Minsk agreements, we heard it multiple times. Russia must implement the Minsk agreements. Well, we want it, but take a look what is written down there. First, make amendments to the constitution in agreement with Donbass. On a permanent basis. Were they introduced? There is a transitional agreement. So what is written down there? A law about a special status of administration. Is it on a permanent basis? I ask them, yes, it is introduced on the permanent basis. So do you know that this law is accepted only for 3 years? And 1 year is already gone by. Yes? And Poroshenko says, yes, only 3 years. That is, I'm almost quoting here. And everyone says, yes, they need to do that on the permanent basis. Well, the actions must follow. Now, the special status law, was it adopted? Yes. In 30 days, to adopt the Rada regulation. Was it adopted? Yes. But now, there is one more article, Article number 10, which stipulates that this law will be implemented only after the election. So the actions are proposed once again. And they say, is it adopted? Yes, we adopted it. But that is basically the manipulation. If you want to really solve the problem, let's stop doing this. Let us work together. We're eager to sit down, to give argumentation, to find a compromise. We're ready to do that, and we want that. So now we need our partners in Kiev to do the same. And now Interfax agency, please. Hello, thank you. Mr. Putin, you just said about the expansion of the military presence in Syria. Well, you're talking about Syria again. No, it's a question about Russia. Right now we have sanctions, the oil price is going down. We're dealing not only with sanctions, but with crisis as well. Will Russia have enough resources to deal with all that? I mean military operations, increasing the military presence there, survival, and other problems. We have enough of them. And here I mean not only financial and military resources. It is easy to start a war, but it's hard to stop it. That's a famous quote. First thing, we did not start a war. We're conducting separate operations using our air space forces, using ballistic missiles and reconnaissance that does not create a very serious burden for our budget. Part of the finances which were planned for training courses and for military exercises. So these funds were reallocated for our airstrikes in Syria. We had to add some, but it does not create a very serious burden for the budget. You should understand, we have large-scale military exercises in Center and in the East 2015. Thousands of people were involved in those exercises. Thousands were relocated, hundreds of UVAs, and part of those funds are reallocated to the Syrian operations. That is probably the best exercise imaginable. That is why we can keep exercising there without any serious detriment to our budget. As for other parts, the question is much more topical here. I mean, solving economic issues which we have. We do what we need to do, and we know what we need to do. We're talking about that publicly. If we go back to the economics, of course, I have already mentioned that we need to do import substitution, and not only the substitution per se, we need to refurbish our economics to increase labor efficiency, to improve business climate, to get more money for the people. That will also drive the economy further. We have a whole complex of measures announced by the government, and we'll do that. Let us get some questions from the regions. I heard that we have a Tula region here. Please use the mic. Anastasia Zhukova, Tula News. My question is the following. In 2014, there was a tragedy in Tula. 2 newborns got burned in the baby house, and they had some very severe burns of 80% of his body. People all around Russia are worried about Matvey, and they worry that that small boy, Matvey, will be adopted just formally, and most of the people are very worried about this little boy, and they want him to have a loving family. Mr. President, could you please put under your personal purview the treatment of the boy and his adoption? What do you think is necessary for this incident not to never to repeat? That is an outrageous incident. It is impossible to talk about that with tears in your eyes. That was a terrible tragedy. I don't want to talk about it, actually. It is terrible. It's not about our health service on the whole. However much money you receive, there will always be people who are completely irresponsible in doing their duties. So I guess we need to talk about the staffing policy and the responsibility of the medical staff. As for adoption and treatment, I know that the whole country is following up on this story. I actually keep it under my purview. And I know that few people, not just one, expressed their wish. They're actually competing for the right to adopt this little boy. I would like to thank them and wish them luck. I hope that this problem will be solved as soon as possible. Madam, I promise that I'll ask you the question. Please, you have the floor. Thank you for keeping your promise. My name is Yekaterina Vinokurova. Point.com News. 2015 is coming to an end, and you're already at the helm for many years, and it seems that we have a whole system in place. What we see now, and we see it very clearly, right now we have a very dangerous second generation of elites. For example, Rodenberg was given all truckers of the country, and now we have not-safe situation for a journalist. We see young people doing some very murky business, and they don't care. We see impunity all around. The children of the oligarchs who will not save the country. These are not elite people. For example, I as a journalist can do some investigations, for example, as in case of Prosecutor General Chaika. What we see is some lies about State Department of the U.S. or other things happen, for example, to the Dozht radio station, which take part in this. Instead of talking to journalists, other things are done. The question is the following. In 2000, you came to power. Did you expect this to happen? Maybe you should change something. Maybe it is not yet too late. Thank you. As for taking stock on the results, if we want to be objective, we would like to say that the outcomes are not just these. The outcome is the increase in the income of the people, and GDP has grown almost twofold. These are the outcomes. Improving the military capacity of the country, that is the outcome. Fighting terrorism, which we still continue to fight. However, the backbone of the terrorism is already broken. These things that you have mentioned, they are possible almost everywhere.
As far as the reaction of the press and society is concerned on the work of the and activities of the children of the highest officials in different areas, well, the young Rothenberg you've been speaking about, his father works nowhere. He's not an official, I mean. He doesn't work in the government, as far as I know. As far as Yuri Chaika is concerned, and who else? Well, doesn't matter. Turchak, Mr. Turchak, and the others. I know that in mass media and in the internet there's information that, for example, Turchak is involved in the beating of journalists. Whether he or his father is involved, it's quite unclear. There's been a famous joke in the Soviet Union when an HR man says, "We will not give new position to this one." Why? Well, 5 years ago, someone stole a coat from his wife, just in case we would not give him a new position. We shouldn't treat it like this. It is good that you draw attention to these facts. That is really good, which gives us additional opportunity and even obligation to respond to that. As far as those manifestations, in particular with the children of the high-ranking officials are concerned, if we speak about the Prosecutor General, that is a very important position, and we must understand whether those children of the Prosecutor General have violated the law or not. and whether the work of the Prosecutor General has some elements linked with the conflict of interests, whether he assisted his children or not. But for that, we have the Control Directorate of the President. I just didn't want to mention that, but it doesn't mean we are not dealing with this matter. We are analyzing it. It must be analyzed. Just as all the data appearing in the internet must be analyzed and checked. Well, now, about the truck drivers. I believe there must be questions directly about this in the audience. Other questions on truck drivers in the audience? Could you just raise your hands? Yeah, the mic there. Well, maybe this question would be more fully formulated. Well, the question is not only about the truck drivers. Everyone knows about the problems of professional drivers who have been protesting for several weeks now against the new fee collection system. But you have the question about the car community as such, because the car drivers really have to give their money away. For example, when this highway from Moscow to St. Petersburg is being constructed, which is the most expensive in Europe, by the way. It costs 1,000 rubles to go along these tracks and back, which is quite expensive for our population. Now, the fees for parking. There is no acute need for that. Everyone has accepted that. But our car community, driver community, is being said that we are doing everything as in Europe. But the level of life here is lower. You've mentioned that the real income of the population have fallen down. Whether such high fees from all the categories are just or not, that's the question. Well, the fees for parking have nothing to do with that. Actually, that's quite a different matter. But apropos, as we can say, I can just mention this thing on these parkings. In all large cities, to solve the problem of too much vehicles in the center of the city is impossible without fees for parking. Of course, there must be common sense and reason there. One must not look at what to do, but how to do this. The prices and fees must be set in accordance with the realia, economic realia. But what decision was taken by the Moscow authorities? You must know about that. The Moscow authorities took decision that those parking lots and their fees were determined not by a directive of the mayor office of Moscow, but in agreement with the municipal authorities. And moreover, the MPs of the municipality have the right to take decision on this matter. They have this right at the local level. And the citizens who live in the houses next to these parkings can use those parkings for free. And I assure you that those citizens, that those Muscovites who live next to these parkings are more for than against the paid parking. Those fees for parking concern people from other regions, from the Moscow region, etc., but that doesn't mean we shouldn't think about them, of course. Of course, the fee must correspond to the average income. But, I repeat, this all is for the municipal authorities to decide. And all the fees, all the payments go 100% to the budget of the regional, of the district budgets. I repeat, that doesn't mean that we must just forget about the highest amount of those fees, but that is in the competence of the municipal and district authorities. Now, as far as other components of car business are concerned, vehicle business are concerned, the most important one, there has been mentioned the Rottenberg Jr. But what is the most important thing? One must look to the essence of the problem and not try to use this or that difficult situation for quasi-political purposes. One must look in the inside. And what do we see in the inside? all the collections that come from the so-called Plateau system, 100% of them goes not to someone's pocket, but 100% of them go to the road fund of the Russian Federation, to a last kopeck. And from there, all those collections, all those fees, to a kopeck, go to the regions of the Russian Federation, to the constituent entities of the Russian Federation, to build roads. I'd like you to hear that. That was the first thing. The second thing, where do those joint ventures between Rostechnologies and the private companies get money from? They get the money from the budget, directly from the budget, in the sum of about 10 billion. What for? To repair the road system, to repair the system, to make it work, to develop it. But what it means that they get money from the budget? It means that everything can be checked and controlled, including by society and by the auditor's chamber. And if someone thinks that those fees are too high, calculate, count, and tell about this. And this would be correct, to count and tell the money from Plateau, so-called Plateau. Do not go to the company, to this joint venture, which is Rostechnology and the private investors are in. Where does this idea come from? It's come from the government some time ago for two reasons. First, in all the transport areas, I mean air transport, river transport, sea transport, railways, the participants of the economic activities pay taxes and fees for using the infrastructure, including railroads. In the car industry, they pay taxes and just a small bit for the infrastructure through the excise, the fuel excise, the petrol excise. That's just a part of payment. But other types of transport pay for the infrastructure in full. That has led to the situation when the part of cargo from river and railways began to be transported via autoroutes, highways, which increased the number of trucks that in their own turn negatively influence this road infrastructure. And the transport tax is similar for the light car and for a truck. Well, I know that the drivers say that the light truck is still heavy, etc., but I quite know that the acceleration and braking of the trucks with a load of more than 12 tons destroys the road more than just simple cars. But the fee is similar for them, the same for them. So in order to make all the areas of transport be equal in their situation, that was the proposal. That's the first thing. The second thing, in 2008 we have cancelled licensing of this type of activities in order to debureaucratize everything. It seemed to be good, but what has it led to? It has led to the fact that there have emerged a lot of people who just buy the trucks and use them. But that's the grey economy. It's grey. They are not even registered as individual entrepreneurs, those people. You know, I'm from a worker family myself, and I know that those guys do work, they drive, etc., but one must leave grey schemes, and I would really like to support those guys. For example, Ms. Panfilova came to me and told me that I met them, they're real workers. Yes, I feel sympathy for them, real sympathy, but we must go away from the grey schemes. I've been asked whether I'm actually satisfied with the government. Well, in this regard, in this matter, something must be adjusted so that they could leave the grey schemes but not be overloaded with some fees and taxes. There's a simple way to do that. Give them the opportunity to buy a patent, a cheap patent, and there is a problem to that. the problem is that patents are given for 1 year and the transportation may be seasonal. But let the government think of how it can be done, and let it do that. Some time ago, when we discussed this with the government, the introduction of a similar system, it emerged that the fee per kilometer exists in many countries in the world. For example, in Belarus, they pay 7 times more per kilometer than in Russia. But it has always been said that when we come to the system, the transportation tax could be cancelled, and it hasn't been. By the way, that was on the insistence of the regional leaders, because this tax goes to the regional budgets. But I believe that must be done at least for bulk trucks, and I do hope that the government will do this since the beginning of at the beginning of the year of next year. Second, I know there are concerns that you must buy some gadgets to pay these fees, which costs money. And here we must understand who should pay for what. For example, this tachograph, or what's it called, which counts how long a man drives. You must pay for that. All the world pays for that. It has to be done. Moreover, in order to ensure the security of the drivers of bulk trucks themselves and other traffic participants, because when a person overworks, when he drives for 20 hours in running, he creates danger for himself and for other traffic participants. And one must pay for that. I don't remember the sum exactly, but one must do that. There are 2 more gadgets. This plateau gadget must be given for free of charge to everyone. And there is a second system, ERA GLONASS or SOS system, which gives the signal during the accident. It must be hidden so deeply that it would not be damaged during an accident. So the first and second part could be united in one box, but the third part, the third gadget, must be separated from them and be inside the truck as deep as possible. And it must be given free of charge as well. Someone says that maybe we should install that to the new trucks for free, and for those trucks that exist, we must tell the price for them. No, you mustn't, because there have been about 2 million those gadgets produced. That was the initiative of the Rostechnology, not of some private people. Why? They just proposed this technical solution, the Rostechnologies. They loaded their own enterprises. Thus they created jobs on their enterprises. That is their intellectual property. Why do they need private people? As investors, they invested 29 billion rubles into that, by the way, for the expense of the elites, whether their children cannot do or cannot do anything. They invested 29 billion rubles in Russia, not into the US, not into the Cyprus, not anywhere else. But the thing is, of course, the system must be adjusted, and this is correct. So I hope that all those systems, including the transportation tax, will be adjusted no later than in the first quarter of the next year by the government of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, our colleague from Georgia, Tamara Gutservidze, Maestro TV company. Mr. President, my question is related to the prospects for the Russian-Georgian relations. It's been 3 years since Georgia saw a change in its leadership. There were expectations that a summit would take place. It is still not clear why the summit hasn't happened. There were expectations that Russia would simplify the visa regime with Georgia, if not abolish it altogether, but these expectations have been in vain. So what does Moscow expect from Tbilisi? What can we expect from Moscow? What can be done to elevate the relations between Russia and Georgia to a new level? What are your assessments? What are the prospects? As to what happened in 2008 and the subsequent deterioration of our relations, we've been talking about that repeatedly, but I think I would be remiss not to repeat it. We were not the ones who are to blame for this deterioration of the relations. It was President Saakashvili who took risky decisions. It is their historical blame. They're the ones to shoulder it completely. They were the ones who led to the deterioration of our relations. Right now, the same is done in Ukraine. As we can see, these people who are to blame for that are still working, and their style of work is still the same. But I think it's a spit in the face of the Ukrainian people. They not just put Ukraine under foreign yoke, but they also send politicians to Ukraine to govern them. Incidentally, I believe Saakashvili has been denied a working visit to the United States, so now he's ended up in Ukraine. So these third-party players are saying to Ukraine, we're simply not going to govern you, we are going to send people to you to govern you, we're going to find people who are going to control everything in your country, finance, economy, because you are not competent enough to do that. There are others who are more competent. As if out of 45 million people, there were no people competent enough to govern the economy and the finance. That's just a spit in the face of the Ukrainian people. Now, as to what is now happening in our relations with Georgia, we are willing to re-establish our relations with this country. It is up to the people of Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia to address the outstanding issues. They have to work together, and we're going to accept whatever decision they make. And as of now, despite all the existing difficulties, we see signals from the current leadership of Georgia, and we take stock of these signals. Pay attention, just 2/3 of wine, raw materials, and wine is exported not to third countries, but to Russia. So our trade is growing. This year, amid the overall economic difficulties, trade has decreased a little bit, but on the whole, the growth rates are very high. Now, as to the visa regime, indeed, we are contemplating this possibility. We are ready to abolish the visa regime. Let's go on. TVC, please, yes, they're so patient, holding up their placard. Thank you. Yekaterina Voskrebentsova, TVC. Mr. President, can we get back to the problems of the Russian economy by autumn this year? It had become evident that the indebtedness of Russian regions was growing rapidly. Analysts, experts, economists are saying, and that is due to the budget imbalances in the constituent bodies. Up to 65% go to external debt payments. And they have no money left to address the acute economic challenges they're faced with. Is that the end of the question? Yes. Well, generally, the objective of the regional authorities is to perform their social responsibilities to the population. And what is the development of the economy? The economy is about putting in place the conditions that would favor such performance. Let us take such examples as the Republic of Tatarstan, the Kalaga region, other regions. They are creating conducive environments. And some places, governors simply give their mobile phones directly to investors, saying that they are available to sort out any problems that might arise. They're also trying to improve the tax environment. Right now, the federal legislation provides the regions with the necessary tools, 2-year tax exemptions, creating advanced development territories, other types of preferences which can be granted to businesses to attract them to this or that constituent entity of the Russian Federation. Certainly, as far as infrastructure is concerned, federal money is required. And indeed, there are certain problems related to heavy indebtedness of a number of regions, and the government is doing what it can. It is taking the necessary steps. We have allocated from the budget additional 160 billion rubles. The overall amount of money is 310 billion rubles. The aim of this money is to restructure the regional indebtedness, so those regions which took commercial loans at 12 to 11%, they can now transfer their indebtedness to budget loans at 0.1%. And we are planning to allocate another 310 billion rubles next year for the same purposes. But the most important thing is this: these loans, the regions are taken, have to be directed at addressing the priority issues, not issues relegated to the background. And what are the essential issues? To pour money into creating new jobs, pour money into creating conditions for the establishment of new industries, new technologies, new infrastructure. The money invested has to generate new income, which will allow the regions to repay their debts and attract additional money to their regional budgets. And this still requires some more work. Let's go on then. The public TV of Russia, please. Thank you. Tamara Shornikova, the public television of Russia. We asked our audience in the regions what they wanted to ask you. The most popular question is this: how can one live on a pension or on a salary without becoming a debtor as far as the utilities are concerned? So it's very important, it's very difficult how to know how to pay the utility bills and still get enough to live by. That is the difficulty many people in towns and settlements are facing right now. The average salary is 20,000-30,000, but people themselves say that their real salary is 7,000 to 8,000 rubles. Not all municipal authorities have the money to help people. Probably it's high time the government intervened. Probably there is a mechanism, or there need to be a mechanism so that the utility bill should not constitute too great a share of the salary of people. The issue that you've just raised is a key issue to millions of our citizens. I believe the audience of the public television not that great, but still sometimes I have a chance to look at your interesting programs. They're very interesting. They are instructive, substantive, very substantial to boot. And indeed, they live up to people's expectations. They are at least trying to give a response to the issues that are of concern to your audience. And one of those issues is the utility bills and the family expenditure, as well as the livelihood of pensioners. Let's start from there. You know that despite all the existing difficulties, despite the inflation last year, we have adjusted the pensions by more than 11% and by more than 10% as far as social pensions go, even though that seemed nigh impossible. And yet we have managed to do it. Next year we are planning to adjust pensions by 4% for all categories, including the military pensioners. We are going to follow what is the economic developments in the country. So I do hope that we are at least going to address the issue of real inflation in 2016, but certainly we cannot simply ruin the budget, otherwise it's going to be worse for everyone. Now, as to the utilities, this year, the average utility bill turned out to be around 8.7%. The growth of the utility bills next year is scheduled to stand at the level of 4%. We assume that we are going to try to bring down the utility bills. This doesn't, however, have anything to do with waste and litter extraction and some other payments that has to be addressed at the municipal level. But the federal legislation stipulates the following: if utility bills constitutes more than 22% of the family revenue, then they are entitled to subsidies. And moreover, regions have the right to bring down this indicator to less than 22% and to provide more subsidies. That's what they did in Moscow and in a number of other regions. This issue has to be dealt with very seriously. We have to look carefully at what the management companies are doing. Much yet has to be done to improve this system even further. Certainly this is going to be the focus of attention both for the government of the Russian Federation and the regional authorities. We still have a long way to go to solve it, but I do hope that the system which has been proposed, whether it be implemented or not, is going to be successful. Let me elaborate a little bit on this system. The federal law stipulates that there is a methodology which allows to calculate an average growth and possible fluctuations to the upside or to the downside. This methodology has to be proposed by the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, which is going to supervise regional authorities in this field.
That is why we are going to monitor the performance of regions and the way the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service is performing and implementing its functions. So let's bring the mic to the middle. Over here, the first row. Thank you very much. My name is Vatan Hosh. I'm the chef of the first Wall Street Journal. Right now, when oil prices plummeted and we are undergoing economic crisis, isn't it the time to privatize state companies? I'm referring to Rosneft and Aeroflot. Would you support that? Would it improve the management of public companies in order to tackle the crisis phenomena? Thank you. Well, you know, when the privatization of large-scale company is carried out, two tasks can be addressed. The first one actually does not have to do with fiscal functions and budget revenues, although it is very important. The most important is the change of the ownership structure in order to increase the efficiency of the company. Regarding Rosneft that you have mentioned right now, Airflot and many other companies, back then in 2012 in my articles I mentioned this possibility, and we would continue working on it. Naturally, there is always a question: is the market conditions are appropriate in order to sell this company which is highly valuable, which is generating huge revenues for the budget, for example, Rosneft. Well, it is always difficult to understand whether the market conditions are appropriate or not. Although in 2015, as you know, the government did not make any decisions related to this privatization, probably in order to provide for the revenues, not to waste resources too rapidly. Maybe in order to change the ownership structure, the government might make these decisions. I'm trying not to interfere, particularly because the government would not lose the controlling stock in these companies. There is an anniversary having agency, the Russia Today agency. They had their anniversary just recently. Good day, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Let me thank you for your congratulations when you visited us for our 10th anniversary in the English division of Russia Today. We highly valued the gift that you gave to Minister of Sport, Mr. Mutko, that is the English-Russian exercise book. Well, maybe these gifts should be given to many other partners, maybe Vitaly Leontovich and his colleagues, with the English language of use for our colleagues. And what are you expecting from your relations with the new president in America, taking into account the elections which are to take place next year? Well, speaking about foreign languages, I can say that Russia is an open country, and the English language is, without any doubts, the most universal, well-spread language. It is highly used in diplomatic relations, in business, in economic sphere. In diplomatic relations, it has become the most widespread language, similar to the times when the French was widespread language. We highly welcome the classes of English at schools. We continue providing English language programs for our experts in all the fields, including those working abroad. I hope that all my colleagues from various agencies, ministries, all those who will work in the regions would try to learn, to master this language well. Regarding Mr. Mutko, you could laugh at him as much as you want, but in this sense, he's deprived of all the complexes and heads up, and he's willing to work. I wouldn't dare making him these gifts if I would know that he would enjoy those presents and that he would highly appreciate them. Well, we could laugh as much as we want, but he is a professional and he knows what is to be done and how. He's trying to work on himself to improve his skills. That is one thing when, from the very childhood, people start mastering foreign languages, and it is a completely different story when people studying foreign languages in the middle age. It is actually the best way to train your brains. That is the best gymnastics for everyone. I hope that my colleagues would be able to listen to what I'm saying and they would start learning those languages. Now, regarding the president, it is difficult to give any outlooks right now, but no matter who is elected, we are willing to cooperate with the United States, and the latest visit of the Secretary of State has demonstrated that the American side is ready to jointly work on those issues that could be addressed only through concerted efforts. And it is a reasonable position, an adequate position position. We have always supported it. We have never tried to isolate ourselves from anyone. They are the ones who are trying to give us hints regarding what is to be done inside the country, who is to be elected, and what procedures are to be used. We are never interfering into them. As our Prosecutor General mentions that if some of the electorate comes up to the people who have been elected closer than 5 meters from standing away from the poll line, this person may be jailed. That is why we're just trying to develop positive relations with our American people. It would support their choice. So I believe there is something connected with Sovietsky sports. Evgeny Tchaikovsky, Sovietsky sport. The state is investing a lot into the professional sports, and professionals would agree to me. And people say that I might feed a hungry one giving him a fish, or you might give him a fishing rod. Right now we are giving a sturgeon, a huge fish, a very expensive fish, to our sports community. And now the issue of doping is highly relevant, which is damaging the stand in our country. Who is to be responsible for that? Well, there are some virtual layoffs. Our team has been declassified, but who is to be responsible for that? And a couple of words regarding the corruption scandal of the FIFA. Is it the Western conspiracy, or there are people who just take bribes? Well, conspiracy is always to be taken into account. You cannot do without it. And another thing that I have always mentioned, no country should have the right to spread the jurisdiction to other countries, particularly when it has to do with international organizations. It does not mean that we should not fight against corruption. Of course, we should do that. Although, when throughout the world foreign nationals are being grabbed and dragged inside the country in order to face criminal charges, I believe this practice is unacceptable. What is to be done? There should be equal, equitable, transparent conditions for cooperation with all the countries in the world. One should not impose one's own jurisdiction on anyone else. There should be frank and transparent conditions for cooperation. I hope that one time soon we will be able to renounce these domination attempts. The same holds true of corruption. Whether there is a corruption case with regards to the FIFA, that should be proven by the probe. Some people are willing to give their testimony and to admit the cases of corruption. Others refuse to do so. Regarding Stephen Blatter, he is a very reputable person who has contributed greatly into the development of modern football. His contribution into the global humanitarian field is enormous. He has always tried to use football not just a kind of sport, but as a tool for fostering cooperation between people. He is the one who should get the Nobel Peace Prize. Everything that has to do with the choice of countries and possible problems related to is none of our business. What we know is that we won the bid to host the World Championship in 2018 as a result of a competitive fight. When I was a Prime Minister, there were cases when people refused to meet members from the FIFA and to talk to them. But in my time as a Prime Minister, I always gave up all my agenda and tried to meet the experts from the FIFA. We went through the regions. We demonstrated how important the development of mass sports is for Russia. We tried to demonstrate how many fans of football we have in our country and the way we are willing to develop football. And FIFA listened to us. In order to develop global football, it decided to let us organize the World Championship in 2018. If you remember, I did not attend the voting procedure itself. I came there later in order to not to participate in any sort of pressure being exerted on anyone, and we actually didn't do that. Let's wait until the investigation is over, and then we'll see what who is actually to blame. Regarding the doping issue, I have presented my point of view regarding this issue. On many occasions, we are against of any sort of doping. First of all, because doping destroys the health of people. It is poison for people. That's the first thing. And the second thing, if people use doping, they should be punished for that. It has been proven. The one who is to blame, the coach, an athlete or an organizer, he's to be held liable. Those people not be liable. It is organization them to be transparent and not to hide anything, and that's the way we're going to follow. These are the agencies, the agency, news agency. News 1. As a woman, I cannot but make a compliment to our president. You look great, you look fit, and I would like to thank you for that, because our boys take you as an example. Young people who are having a healthy lifestyle. Well, let me stress that I'm not using doping. That's the most important part. So we would want all these young boys to be active in the cities or regions where they live. Annually, the Kurgan region, based on the federal program, receives 24 grants for the development of their own farms, but that is not enough. I would like to present the grief of all our farmers. They need 3 times more this time to start one's own business in our region. 71 people wanted to do that, and only 20 of them received the necessary and required grants. And it is very difficult to meet all the demands in the region with these 20 quotas, but we want to keep young people in our regions and towns. Thank you very much.
This issue is extremely important, the development of farming and of agriculture. Of course, I'm well aware of discussions between representatives of various forms of development of agriculture. One say that, first of all, we should develop major goods production, and only this major goods production and not farmers can provide for food for the country, good quality food, and in the necessary amounts. But without any doubts, we should support farmers and farming production. Farmers make an important contribution into providing food security. I've already said this on multiple occasions, and I can repeat that all plans related to the support for the agricultural industry will be implemented, including the financial support. You have just mentioned 1.5 million rubles for the opening of one's own business. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe there are some other instruments, including in Kurgan, as well as other constituted entities of the Russian Federation. With the help of those means, regulatory means, including financial and fiscal regulation, it is possible to support those who want to start their own businesses. For example, a decision can be made, and a federal law provides for such an opportunity to regions. One can be exempted from taxes for 2 years, those who start their own businesses, and I'm referring to individual entrepreneurs, but these are specific cases, and it's up to people themselves to make a legal registration of what they are doing, what they're starting to do, but this would be a great help. But there are other forms as well. The single agricultural tax could be somehow transformed in order to alleviate the financial burden, the fiscal burden. One can also help to create the infrastructure to sell products so that farmers could sell their products. And considerable assistance that has never been before is that we have liberated our market for our national producers, because the growth demonstrated by the agriculture now, 3% or even more than 3%, shows this trend. This, of course, has a certain impact on consumers because prices are growing. It has an impact on fundamental macroeconomic indicators from the point of view of the inflation growth. But in the final run, in terms of dollars, we are hoping for a gain, which will consist in the growth of production. And in Kurgan region, they should consider the possibilities that the government has provided to support farmers. We'll look at how the situation is going to develop. If there is a need, we can allocate additional resources. We do have them in principle for 2016. There was, I saw a poster there, Pepsi. Yulia Izmailova. Yulia Izmailova, Молодой Leninets newspaper from Penza. So a young Leninets is asking about pensions. This is a long-term planning. Most of our readers are old people. Yes, they are old people, but they're all young Leninists. I would like to find out, what is your opinion? In February, pension indexation for working pensioners will be cancelled. Can this bring some problems for working pensioners and a growth in grey income? Yes, this is an issue that has been discussed by the government for a long time and on multiple times. Let me remind to you what was the case in the Soviet Union. So people had an opportunity to both work and get their pensions only in those industries and to those categories of workers who were deficient. For example, the junior medical staff, personnel in culture, all others had to choose either to work or to get their pensions. And when there was a collapse of the social sphere and of economy in general, we made a decision that everyone who wishes to do so could do so. But there are different views. Maybe we should come back to the Soviet period practices, but the fiscal gains won't be great if working pensioners are denied pension. There is no such decision. Where have you got this decision from? There is a decision not to indexate pension, but where is the decision on the non-payment of pension to the working pensioners? There was a decision not to adjust pensions for working pensioners, but please look at the decisions that have been adopted and inform your readers about them. I think people will hear me right now. If a person has made a decision to continue working, his pension will not be adjusted in 2016 or in 2017, but in 2018, if he or she makes a decision to stop working, then they will not get the money for 2016 and 2017. But when they start receiving pension without working, these adjustments will be also accounted for this category of pensioners, and they will receive pensions in an adjusted pensions with the adjustment that has been received by other citizens in previous years. So such decisions have been adopted, but they're still being discussed and started from the point of view of consequences, including in the labor market. Are there any clarifying questions on pensions? Российская newspaper. Российская newspaper, Kirilla Dukhin. I have a clarifying question to follow up on this issue. There have been discussions in the government and State Duma on increasing the retirement age, and the decision was made to increase the retirement age for public officials. Will this help to save money? Will any other decisions be adopted in this regard? I'm also wondering about the situation with military pensioners, because there is a discussion right now that, as you've been said, but military pensioners are a major category of those people who are working and receiving pension at the post time, and they are concerned about this. As I've already said, that the pension of military pensioners will be adjusted by 4% in the beginning of the year. As for those pensioners who are working or not, I believe that there should be a common procedure for all pensioners, whether they're working or not. As for the retirement age, you know what my position is, and I've been opposing the increase of pension age, the retirement age. There are some problems. As for increasing the retirement age for public officials, at national, regional and municipal levels, to bring it up to 65 years for men and for women. Let me remind you that we're talking about step-by-step increase by 6 months. What does it mean? A woman reaches the retirement age, and next year she is supposed to retire. She's 55 years old. It means that she will retire at 55 years and 6 months. And this will be a step-by-step procedure for everyone. I'm talking about public officials, of course. The fiscal result is minimum. In whole, on the whole, talking about the increase of the retirement age, I still believe that the time has not come for that yet. But let me be frank with you. Many experts tell me, if you want, by doing good to people, you will hurt them at the end of the day, because the life expectancy is growing. In 2005 or 2006, life expectancy in Russia was 65 years, about 65 years. Now it's more than 71 years, 71.2 years, and the number of the working population making contributions to the pension system is on the decrease, and the number of pensioners is on the increase. So if we do not respond to this trend, what will it result in? It will result in shrinking incomes of the pension system. This year, they dropped because the real earnings dropped, and the pension fund is being formed from the income of the working population. There is a deficit of the pension system, and we have to add these resources to the pension fund from the federal budget. I think that this is a one-time issue, but as long as the life expectancy grows, the number of the working population will decrease comparing to the number of non-working citizens. Then we might face systemic issues relating to resources of the pension fund. What might it lead to? It might lead to decreased income of pensioners themselves. The state will have to decrease the amount of pensions or to increase the retirement age. But if we do so, we should do it in a calm manner. There should be no haste, as it is the case with the public officials' pensions. When are we going to do this? Well, sometime in the future. This has already been done in all countries around us. But when do we need to do this? I don't want to answer this question publicly because we do not have any answer at the moment. This is an economic issue that we are facing, a purely economic issue. What was the case in other countries? They also acted step by step. Now the gap between people who are pensioners is considerable, but it will grow. Decisions should be made in a due manner, timely manner, so that not to break the pension system in 10, 15 or 20 years. But what I want to say and what I want people to hear is that it will have no effect on people who are pensioners already. They have nothing to do with these changes of the pension system. No one will make them, even if they became pensioners yesterday, return to their work. All those who have already become pensioners, those who have already retired, will have a full access to all pension rights. RBK.
Холдинг РПК состоит из нескольких СМИ, поэтому, чтобы никого не обидеть, я, с вашего позволения, задам несколько очень коротких вопросов.
Несколько — это сколько?
Два.
Здесь много людей хотят...
Не будут короткими. Во-первых, в кризис государственной компании, о которых уже коллега из Wall Street Journal говорил, так и не снизили зарплаты и бонусы для своих сотрудников. Зато эти компании постоянно просят у правительства льготы налоговые, они обращаются за средствами из Фонда национального благосостояния. Что вы отвечаете на эти просьбы? И я не могу еще вас не спросить по поводу Катерины Тихоновой. Мы знаем, что она руководит важным проектом в МГУ. Наши западные коллеги сообщают о том, что это ваша дочь. Правда ли это, и что вы думаете по поводу ее начинания?
She's your daughter. And Our journalist is sitting in prison for a few months. He was investigating the Vostochny Cosmodrome. He's being investigated, and he's accused of a non-violent crime. We're afraid that this is some kind of infringement on the freedom of speech. I read about this on the internet and in many other medias about Yekaterina Tikhonova and other my possible relatives and daughters. I read different things at different times, and very recently it was said that my daughters first are being educated abroad and live permanently abroad. Well, right now, thank God, no one is writing about it, and that is true. The daughters are living in Russia, and they never lived abroad permanently. Their education was received in Russia. They studied only in the Russian universities. I do not say that they have no contacts with their colleagues. That is not true. I'm proud of them. They continue to study and to work. Russia Today asked about question about the languages. My daughters speak 3 languages fluently. One of them speak one of the Eastern languages, and they can explain themselves in these languages. One daughter can speak European languages. They're not just able to speak these languages, but they use them in their work. They made a decision about their careers, and they're achieving great success. I never discuss the questions about my family. They're not active in business, and they don't do politics. They're not getting out anywhere. As for the university project, whatever the surname, this was a rector's initiative of the university, and it's a good initiative. What's the crux of the matter? The idea is to bring together the possibilities of our tertiary education to the business circles. The university does not know how to bring out the scientific findings of the universities, and the businessmen are paying thousands of dollars for the innovations abroad. So this initiative of the rector to bring together these capabilities, that's a good intention. Is it successful? That you'll have to ask from the rector and his colleagues. As for my daughters, I'm not going to discuss them right now. That is also due to security matters. I think that every person has the right to decide his own future. My daughters were never star children. They never got the satisfaction from the limelight. They're just living their lives and do that in a very dignified way. As for Mr. Sokolov, is he arrested for some kind of revelations and disclosures about the Vostochny Cosmodrome? That's the first time I'm hearing about this situation. If he uncovered some cover-up, then I'm thankful to him. Of course, I will help him if it is possible. We just need to find out more about the situation. I'm very interested in the fact that this project initiated by me some time ago, a few years ago, I used to travel out there, and I chose the building point for this cosmodrome. One of the specialists suggested another place on the shore of the Pacific Ocean, not far from Vladivostok. There were several points. They almost started to build it, and the same experts said that it's not the best way. If we take a look at the Canaveral Cape in the U.S., they always have to postpone the launches due to weather conditions. That's the oceanic climate very unstable weather. So it's better to put it somewhere further in the continent. So that's why we started to build it where we are building it now. It's a great national project. We're creating the whole city, and I hope that will be built in time. I think they were lagging behind for 1.5 years. Right now, we're closing in on that gap up to half a year almost. I hope that the outlined deadlines for the first quarter of the next year, that will be the time of the first launch. However, the speed is not the main thing. We need the quality. That's what I hope for. And now, about the first part of your question about the National Welfare Fund and the state-owned companies. You're right that all the state-owned companies, all the state need to be more efficient and to cut on their costs. That is right. We need to work on that. We talked about it, about the bonuses a year ago. The earnings are counted starting from the top, depending on the top managers. And we need for the best managers to come to the top, not only from our country, but also from abroad. So it happens that such bonuses are, according to the law, they're illegal. So if we do not improve the bonuses, that means that we cannot get top management at the top. However, the part of the top management, they could do this thing. They can give part of their income to the charity that is possible. As for the National Welfare Fund, they need to improve the governance of the companies. I personally think that we need to very carefully take a look at the costs coming from the National Welfare Fund's pocket. This money should go to such projects that would not be just a pure loss, but would create conditions to develop the whole economy. For example, $150 billion to improve Trans-Siberian Railway and Baikal-Amur Railway. To develop this BAM railroad is very important. We already have the cargo, which we need to drive. There were $50 billion investments. As soon as they built this road, the cargo started coming, and we got the payback. And there are not so many projects coming from the National Welfare Fund pocket. Another thing, the beltway around Moscow. We need to create additional transportation possibilities for Moscow so that Muscovites will benefit from that. That will also help the growing economy. 150 billion coming for that. Rosatom received money to build a commercial nuclear plant in Finland. Despite those who want to take down building this nuclear plant, the plant was planned and they're being built. The Rosatom already invested billions of euros in that project. And this Finnish company took the risk and started working. That is the right investment. It's a good risk. I think around 180 billion were invested into the Russian Fund of Direct Investment. However, for $1, for $1 Russian dollar, they raise 10 foreign dollars. That's the right investment. Any other investments are non-existent. However, we'll think about other projects, but they should have to be as effective and efficient as those projects which I have already named. Oil. Let's talk about oil. and Il-96. But first, oil. The lady here. Hello, Mr. President. My name is Natalia Menshikova. I'm from Nizhny Vartovsk region, that's Yugra, the Samotlor region. The majority of the Russian oil is produced in our region. However, it was explored in the 1970s. So that's the question. Do you intend to invest more in the geological survey? And the pensioners of Nizhny Vartovsk congratulate you with the new year. Thank you very much. I would like to express my gratitude to the pensioners of Nizhny Vartovsk and all other regions. Thank you for support, despite all the hardships that people come across. And these people don't have a lot of income. This group of people is one of the most responsible groups of society. These people went through extreme hardships after the war, and they put in so much to improve the economy. They have went through so much. And right now, they have nothing to count on apart from the support from the state. And we are thankful to them for this patriotic atmosphere, for their eagerness to help to grow the upcoming generation. I'm talking not only about the veterans of the Second World War, but also the labor veterans. Thank you and Happy New Year to you. Let's give it up for this part of our country, not for me. This applause goes to the veterans. What about the geological surveying? That's an important part of the future. And you know that we adopted a number of measures on the sulfurous oil. And we plan to use the dwindling wells. We have made other decisions regarding taxations. I know that the oil people are not very happy with all of the measures. As for the tax maneuver, it was promised that due to increase of the tax, the tariff, the export tariff will be increased as well. Well, we raised the tax, that's true, for oil and gas. And the government has created an extra burden for the oil branch. And let's hope that it does not always last forever. They agree with that. The oil industry does not cut short on those plans to develop further wells. However, the government needs to be very careful in monitoring the oil branch in order not to kill off the hen which gives us golden eggs. Geological survey is very important, but it's not the way it happens. You say that all the surveying was done in the 70s and now we do nothing. That's not true. We're investing in many programs as a part of governmental programs as well. We need to stimulate private companies and state-owned companies to do that. The work is continuing. I cannot give you some specific figures, but they are in place and they're quite impressive. Maybe that's not enough, but we never forget about this. Yes, and I promised to ask about the plane, the aircraft. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Could you speak louder, please? Nakanouni.ru Information Agency. Do you support the idea of mass production of Il-96 aircraft? Do you think that using just the foreign aircraft in the light of the tragic events is wrong? The question about the presidential air group, do you use Russian aircraft or foreign? I completely share your concern. Aircraft building industry is extremely important. They provide part of the high-tech industry and its development in our country. That's part of our Soviet legacy. But of course, Soviet Union worked on the military aviation and then adopted it for the civil aviation. The people did not see this is a resource depending on the efficiency of the kerosene for the civil aviation. Right now, we cannot do that.
But no doubt, we have to provide for domestic flights with our own domestic flight means, but also we must exit to foreign markets, and we should guide all our producers or manufacturers, including the manufacturers of aircraft, to attain such quality of production which would be competitive with their partners. As far as the large aircraft are concerned, this means large investments, and we have agreed with our Chinese partners that we'll do that together, and we are moving along this track, which I'd like to tell you about. This is about big and bulk aircraft for long distances. But that's not enough for us. We do need to provide our own aircraft to small, short routes, to regional carriers. And there are plans, I believe, that's PU-114, PU-14, that is the old, new, well-forgotten project, with all the innovations and innovations which must be used and which are necessary for a modern product. You know that we've just had an important, a most important event in engine construction, the new engine 214, which is the first product of this kind since 1980s. It's the most advanced one. We usually don't give any attention to that, but that is the huge achievement of our engine producers, jet engine producers. I said this at one of my meetings, and now I'd like to use this opportunity to congratulate our engineers with this result and to thank them for their work. This gives us the opportunity to develop our aircraft manufacturing further on, including IL-95, I believe, aircraft, 96, okay, which you've asked about. The energy support of the new engine and its capabilities allow us to develop the whole line of aircraft, both mid-range and long-range ones, long-distance ones. This, by the way, used to be the weakest part of our production because we had either to use Pratt & Whitney or Rolls-Royce engines. They have good engines, but our engines are better now when we'll deal with avionics as well, and our planes must be better. We have forgotten to give the floor to NTV, so if we may, NTV. Thank you very much for not forgetting us. Mr. President, you spoke about oil, but I'd like to ask you about gas. That's one of the basics of the Russian welfare, and here some things remain unclear. We know that the actions of the Ukrainian authorities are unpredictable. We can see that due to the events in the Crimea, where the power transmission was just cut. No one can guarantee that Ukraine does not cut the gas transit to Europe. And due to the situation with Turkey, the negotiations on the Turkish stream were frozen, and we don't know when they are resumed. We have the additional variant, the saving variant, which is the Nord Stream 2. But now a group of the EU countries have announced a protest against this construction and want to stop this project from happening as it has been done with the South Stream. So what are we to expect in that? And besides, what are we to expect from the construction of the nuclear power plant in Turkey, where $3.5 billion were already invested? No, Russia hasn't invested $3.5 billion in the nuclear power plant want, and the matter about the future of this project should be solved on the corporate level. This is a purely commercial issue, and we'll take no step that would harm our economic interests. But this is for Rosatom and its partners to decide. As far as I know, there haven't been even the necessary license given by the Turkish side for to consider this project a priority one. But I repeat, this decision must be a corporate one, not governmental one. Now, about Nord Stream 2 and those who are against, we know that there have been many countries against Nord Stream 1, but it has been implemented nevertheless. And as it turned out, it was implemented right in time. And of course, there haven't been all the conditions fulfilled to load it in full, but especially on those pipelines that are on German territory. One route has about 50% of load, another almost 0% of load, but this is a potential which can be used, I'm sure. On the South Stream, you know our views. We were ready to implement this project. We weren't allowed to do that. First, the European Parliament adopted a decision that this project did not correspond to the interests of the European Union and sent the paper about that. Then the European Commission demanded that Bulgaria would stop the preparatory work and construction. Then the Dutch regulator, where the South Stream was registered, didn't take the decision to allow us to give the construction on the sea. But how could we begin this construction, just drown the billions of euros, then come to the Bulgarian shores and not be allowed to construct through Bulgaria? We were not allowed to continue this project, and I'm, by the way, very surprised with the position of the Bulgarian leadership, who have neglected their own national interests. We were to invest 3 billion in the project, into construction, the salaries, new jobs, etc., and then each year 400 million euros Bulgaria would receive for transit. Well, no is no, if they didn't want that. We have thought of this project because we wanted to support Bulgaria. I mean, one of the reasons for that. They don't want it? Okay. Now, we have begun speaking about the Turkish stream. That does not depend on us in the end. We haven't stopped the negotiations. We need the European Commission to give us written guarantees that all the routes, including maybe the route through Turkey to Europe, would not only be implemented, but would be priority ones and will be supported by the European Commission. If Gazprom and our Turkish partners bring us such a paper from Brussels, we'll move forward. But so far, unfortunately, we see nothing of that kind. Now, the transit through Ukraine. Yes, at the corporate level, I have heard myself during those acute discussions that some said, we will cut transit, but I'm not sure that this should be done, the transit through Ukraine. But if we compare the capabilities of Ukrainian transit and the capabilities of transit through Nord Stream 2, well, everyone demands for Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 in future to meet certain requirements. What requirements are there? Reliability, the market operation of this gas transportation system, legal and administrative regulation at the highest standards. Can our Ukrainian partners do the same? The same things that we are doing with our European partners in the Nord Stream. If they can, we'll work with them further on. If they can't, then we'll analyze what we'll do next. You're welcome. Well, let us give the floor to Yamal, maybe. Mr. President, Sorry. The Krasny Sever, the Red North newspaper, Yamal-Nenetsky Autonomous District. My question is about the North Latitude Passage. Thank you for supporting our Yamal project, and the authorities of our region are doing a lot as well. In particular, till the end of the year, we'll sign the PPP agreement about constructing the road from Ivanenko to Sivida. But unfortunately, the road Salikard-Nadin, which is really needed now, the construction is being frozen or slowed down now, and the project is getting more and more expensive. Could you just accelerate this project somehow? Yes, that is a needed project. Yamal is our treasury, gas treasury, oil treasury, and we will develop it further on. You know about a large international project where Novatec and our Chinese partners are participating, French partners as well. And we are supporting and assisting this project implementation. By the way, one of the reasons to that is that the foreigners have already invested there earlier than us. And those investments, which were done by our foreign partners in advance before us, actually made us invest in the project ourselves, because it would be ridiculous if after foreigners made their investments, we would stop to invest and support the project. That would be unfair towards our foreign partners who have supported the project. And I'd like to say again, this is a needed and important project, and we are thinking about the future, taking into account that the sales of the LNG in the world markets will be growing. And today, we sell LNG only the Far East within the joint projects or on swap agreements, which is done by Gazprom. But here we'll have a joint, powerful Russian, French, Chinese project with huge production capacities and with the opportunity to go to almost all the foreign markets. So we are thinking about the future, and we are doing that. So I'm, by the way, very surprised even that the CEOs of this project have such huge successes, because everything is constructed in due time, with high quality at the necessary level. The thing that you have spoken about, I believe, is very important, because if such a huge terminal is constructed and the extraction of such kind exists, then we'd like the port that is created there to be universal, so that it could ship and load not only the LNG goods and commodities, but other goods as well, various goods, so that there goods flow from the Trans-Siberian Railway and Baikal-Amur Railway would move there to Yamal. There's good logistics. There could be any cargo used. But the question of the budget financing, of course, needs additional analysis. I mean, the budget restrictions, fiscal restrictions, there we must look at different options, maybe attract investments by our partners from abroad. And there is interest to that, I'd like to say. And I do hope, I mentioned the Direct Investment Fund. I do hope that this fund will work on this project as well. We do not forget about these projects. We always remember about them, and with the first opportunity, we'll further on support this project. Egypt, you have the floor, please. Good afternoon, Mr. President. I have two questions. The first one about Egypt. About Egypt. Well, I hope that about Egypt. When will you allow Egypt to be open for Russian tourists again? That's the first question. And the second question, the Saudi Arabia 2 days ago announced that they created a new alliance, Islamic alliance. As I see it, this is the Sunni alliance. And the problem is, what would be with Shias and what will be with the Russian-led alliance, especially taking into account that Turkey is a part of this Islamic alliance. And that's the most dangerous thing. So I'd like to hear your comments on this thing and on the first question as well. Well, first, as far as tourism is concerned, the decisions that have been taken by us to limit the flights of our civil aviation to Egypt are not linked or have nothing to do with any mistrust or lack of trust to the Egypt authorities. That is not a political decision. That is due to the necessity to enhance security of our citizens. We just tell our citizens, unfortunately, at the moment, those services and controlling bodies, law enforcement bodies, special services bodies that exist there are not capable to cope with the threat of terrorism, which is the threat to us and you, and to Egypt, I mean. The President of Egypt, Mr. Sisi, shows great personal courage in fighting this threat, but that just takes time in order to cut all those problems. And as soon as we really adjust the mechanisms which would allow us to enhance efficient security of our people, we'll lift all the restrictions. This work is being done, is being performed with our Egyptian partners.
What can these measures look like? It means that at this time we have to have our representatives at every stage, from the landing to the loading, to taking off, and so on and so forth. We do not think the official Egyptian authorities are to blame in the least. It is our common threat, and we have to come up with a common solution to these challenges. Now, as to the coalition established by Saudi Arabia, that is yet another coalition. We do not think that this coalition will be of an anti-Russian nature. Turkey is not the only country that is part of this coalition. We do not think that Turkey is our adversary. No, not in the least. Yes, indeed, they performed an act which was hostile to Russia, but Turkey is not our enemy, and the ball is not in our part of the field as of now. It's in the Turkish part of the field. But Turkey is not the only member of this coalition. Egypt is in this coalition, as well as a number of other countries. This coalition was initiated by Saudi Arabia. Our approaches with regard to the Syrian settlement differ as far as certain aspects are concerned, but at the same time there are similarities between our approaches. Just recently I met the king. We work together. We have regular contacts at the level of the defense ministry, the foreign ministries. As of now, we are contemplating joint project in the field of military and technical cooperation. It is a whole program worth many billions of dollars. So we do not believe that this alliance that is being created is aimed against Russia. Not at all. We have certain challenges in the field of fighting terrorism, and that's why we have to pull our efforts together. We shouldn't try tearing apart the capabilities that we have at our disposal. To be honest, I do not understand quite well what has happened. The United States has already created an alliance headed by the United States, and this alliance has as its members both Saudi Arabia and Turkey, so I do not think what was missing. Why did they need to establish a new alliance apart from the one existing headed by the United States? Do you have a separate plan? Do they have some internal differences? Yes, probably some internal differences have a reason. Might have. There are regional interests in play. But apart from these interests, there are also interests that are shared by humanity in general. Europe is suffering from what is happening in this region. We saw those atrocious crimes in Paris. The US is suffering as well. We saw the slaughter of 4 people recently. There are other terrorist attacks and threats of those. We have to fight terrorist organizations, whatever their name and whatever the motto, the slogan they use to justify their actions. I do hope that the alliance that has been established recently is going to work in a constructive vein. We're going to come up with joint approaches and will foster successful, efficient cooperation and will use efficient instruments together to fight terrorism. Yes, what's with this journalist? What happened to journalists in Kaliningrad once again? Kaliningrad, and information portal klobs.ru. Klobs, yes, it's a German dish, you know. Indeed. Klobs.ru, all right. Yes, indeed. Every day Kaliningrad witnesses road accidents. Klobs, is it a cutlet or something? Yes, kind of. Kaliningrad sees several road accidents every day, and pedestrians are either injured or even killed. A colleague of ours has recently become a victim. Nadezhda Zhevskaya has been run over by a car at a pedestrian crossroad by a man, a student of the FSB Academy. No criminal charges were brought, and this man still has his BMW. Oh yes, a good student, he has a BMW. And our colleague is now ridden in a wheelchair. Oh, it's just terrible. So the question is, what can prevent, what can give, is there anything that can give immunity to people? No, certainly not. Nothing can give immunity. Not the military uniform or the post, the position. No, nothing can prevent this man from being brought accountable. Certainly there are certain factors which might prevent the investigation from going further, but I can assure you that the investigation is going to be conducted on an unbiased basis, in an impartial manner. I do not know what exactly happened. Indeed, when a road accident happens, there might be different points of view, but what I can tell you is that this investigation has to be completed, and those who are responsible have to be brought accountable. Whoever was behind the wheel has to be held responsible. And I can tell you that those who drive have greater responsibility because vehicles are very dangerous. And the one who suffered is always less to blame. There is only one situation in which the pedestrian is to blame. Then that is when the pedestrian was the one who deliberately caused the road accident. In other types of situations, the driver is to be held accountable. It can be penal responsibility or administrative responsibility. Drivers have to know about that. Defense? Oh yes, let's talk about defense. Good afternoon. I'm from the city of Tula. Tula, as it says in the hymn, in the anthem, has been forging weapons for centuries. I have a question about the government procurement of weapons. There are data that the government procurement of weapons are going to increase every year by 10%, but in light of the oil prices, given the current economic situation, Are there any chances that the government procurement of weapons are going to be frozen or reduced? Well, am I asking that because it's about the livelihood of those who live in Tula, about our jobs? Just listen, the industries, especially the defense industry, are all long-term projects that are initiated, are better off if they're completed, even economically. Let's take an example. We've started building a submarine. I know Tula doesn't create submarines, but whatever it is, a submarine, an aircraft, missile system, or an aircraft, money has been invested. Freezing this project is more costly than completing the project, because once frozen, you need money to maintain it, to pay the engineers, to pay the staff that are maintaining. They're not working per se, but they're still receiving salary, and there is another alternative. You can lay off, but that is going to be even more costly because afterwards you won't be able to find good specialists. So economically, it's better to complete projects. The Russian defense program stipulates that these projects have to be completed by 2025. Yes, indeed, we have certain problems with the budget given the oil prices that are becoming lower. We are doing as follows. We are acting as follows. It's no secret. I'm telling it quite frankly. We are deferring the start of certain projects that have not yet been started. So, as experts say, we are postponing these projects, but all the projects that have already been started are going to be completed, and what has been postponed is not critical neither to the defense capabilities of the country nor to the economy. It just helps relieve the budget burden. We have to be very prudent, very cautious. The defense ministry, the government have to be very careful, and that's why we meet 2 times each year in Sochi. Everyone sits at the table, we calculate all the costs, and then we come up with recommendations. That is one of the tracks we are pursuing, working together with the defense ministry and the defense industry. So if not by 2020, then by 2021 or even further. But all the objectives that we have put forward before us are going to be completed. Thank you. Let us be patient, and I think we have to be winding up a little bit. Echo of Moscow, please. You see, it's dictatorship. Thank you very much, Alexei Solomin, Echo of Moscow Radio, and the website Historical Amateur, Alexei Solomin. Mr. President, first, I wanted to bring some clarity. There was a question about Turchak. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit silly, you know. Just like my boss. Well, what can we do about that? Mr. President, do you think it might be a good thing that as long as the investigation is going on, to suspend the governor? Well, this is not going to mean that he is responsible, that he is guilty. It will simply prevent him from influencing the investigation. My principal question is about Boris Nemtsov assassination. We know from the leakages from the investigative committee and from the victim that there are many problems. Inspectors are prevented from getting access to 2 persons who are figuring in this affair, Makhudinov and the other one. We don't know where they are exactly, whether they are in the Chechen Republic or abroad. Ramzan Kadyrov has repeatedly spoken in favor of those who are implicated in this affair. You have had many chances to talk to Mr. Kadyrov. Did you talk about this affair? Did he manage to convince you of their innocence? And yet another question about that infant who is now handicapped. According to the statistics, Russia still has many handicapped children, and they are not living in families. Probably the prohibition of adopting children by foreigners might be relieved a little bit. First, please do not take your seat yet, just yet. Let's structure our work as follows. Let's start from the last part of your question. The statistics shows us that, as far as the percentage goes, the adoption of our handy-capable children by foreigners is not that great. No foreigners were ever that eager to adopt handy-capable children. That's the statistics.
That is why we are not going to speed up the process of amending the decisions that have already been made. Now, regarding Tochak, as far as I have heard from the internet and other media sources, it's not about him. It's about the fact that his father intervened. Well, you know, I'm not aware of that, but I believe that both administrative and legal decisions are to be made based on accurate facts that have been come up with as a result of investigation and trial proceedings, rather than media publications, no matter how much we value and respect those publications. Now, regarding the crime committed against Boris Nemtsov, I knew him personally. Not always did we have bad relations. I never spoiled those relations, actually, but that was his choice, the choice of political rebukes and attacks, and I got used to that. But it doesn't mean that a person is to be killed for that. I will never accept that, and that is the crime that should be investigated, and culprits should be held liable. All the accomplices should be identified and punished, no matter who they are. Well, you said that they might be hiding in Chechnya or they might have gone abroad. We need to identify that. Never have I discussed these issues with the regional leaders and with the leadership of Chechnya. It is up to the investigation to identify all those facts, no matter how long it lasts. There was a case of killing of Saravotova. She was an oppositionist to a certain extent, and investigation was completed on that case in the same way as it was done with respect to cases with the involvement of opposition. I believe that all those cases should be investigated, all culprits should be identified and punished. Thus, we will be able to create a sustainable political system inside the country, which is much more important than to cover up for anyone. No one is going to cover up for anyone anytime. But what we need is to wait until the objective investigation is brought to an end. Sevastopol. There is a Sevastopol. Maybe we would give a mic to the representative of Sevastopol. Where is this representative? Where is it? Please, go ahead. Sergei Gorbachev, the chair of the Union of Journalists. Where are you? Please, show up. Right in front of you. Well, recently, the most popular toast of Sevastopol to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. I thank you. Irrespective of the fact and the scope of the holiday we are actually celebrating, but please don't drink too often, just keep it down. Well, and this toast is based on cordiality and gratitude on behalf of all the people of Sevastopol. I thank you for that. The problems that we are facing throughout the last 2 years boil down to the fact that at the highest level, Sevastopol is not positioned in any way. At the regional level, there is a counterproductive discussion regarding the fact what Sevastopol should look like. Either it should be an IT center, a Silicon Valley, or a tourist center for resorts. But Sevastopol has always been a key naval base. It is the city of federal importance. It is a separate, constituent part of the Russian Federation. It is not Vladivostok, it is not Kronstadt, no matter how much I respect those cities. That is why, at the highest possible level, actually, it is up to you to reconfirm that the main goal and role of Sevastopol is not to produce wine, but rather to add to the defense capabilities of Russia. One more thing. The fleet is a conservative organization which is guided by traditions, and there is yet another tradition which is the privileges given to officers who retire and get into reserves. They have the right to inherit their uniform, including the sea dagger, because recently those daggers are to be taken away from officers who retire. For so many years, I don't understand who would need my dagger, and if you, as the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, make a decision to let officers who retire keep their daggers in the same way as it used to be in our older times and in the modern history of Russia, I believe that thousands of officers would be very grateful in the same way as their children and grandchildren would be grateful to you, especially those who would service for Russia at the remote fronts. Well, first of all, regarding the role and importance of Sevastopol and the ways for its future development, I cannot but agree with the fact that from the military and naval point of view, Sevastopol is much more important than the base located in Vladivostok and at the Kamchatka region, where our second most important and largest nuclear submarine fleet is located, with missile carriers and nuclear weapons on board, and strategical weapons on board. A lot has been done to preserve this base, and we will continue developing it further. In the north and in the far east, our bases have direct access to the world ocean, and back then, in Soviet times, and here we could pay tribute to the Soviet government, because it did a lot for the development of infrastructure in the north, including for these purposes, in Murmansk and in the Far East. And it is our duty to do everything we can so that all those efforts were not in vain, so that we could improve and develop further everything that was achieved by our ancestors. Sevastopol is yet another important element of the maritime infrastructure in this part of the world. As you know, we are equipping our Black Sea fleet with new submarines, new ships. Right now, the Rostov-on-Don submarine has arrived in Novorossiysk, where we have created a very important, powerful and modern base. I believe there should be 6 of such submarines deployed there. Let me remind you of the fact that these are the submarines with the most advanced missiles, caliber missiles, that have demonstrated their efficiency in the operations in Syria. There are going to be surface ships to be deployed there. Naturally, Sevastopol as a fleet base is going to be developed further. Well, anywhere you go, there are problems that have been inherited from the previous times. Right now, we're working on the power sector. The equipment, electricity equipment of the Crimea haven't been retrofitted since 70s, as if there was no need to do that. And the fleet base is the same. A lot is to be done in order to upgrade infrastructure there. But we cannot say it won't be right to say that Sevastopol is only to be a fleet base. Back then, Vladivostok was also a closed, restricted area, and it developed only as a fleet base. And that is why the city itself was in a very dismal state. There was no infrastructure, no roads, no ports, no modern social facilities, theaters, museums, and right now everything is developing in modern conditions. No matter where people live, and particularly in Sevastopol, people should have access to all those facilities. And I'm confident that Sevastopol should be developing in various fields. How to achieve that? Well, first of all, it is up to the population of Sevastopol to decide, by the leadership of Sevastopol to decide. There are different approaches. Some are willing to develop Sevastopol as a Silicon Valley, as you have just mentioned, and there's nothing bad about that. Instead of developing poisonous, harmful productions with poisonous emissions, Sevastopol should develop a high-tech production, as well as develop production with the involvement of members of the fleet and military, because these are high-skilled, knowledgeable people. I didn't know that, actually. The territory of Sevastopol is not restricted to the urban area itself. There are lots of possibilities for the development of resorts and tourist facilities. We should do that. We should provide assistance to Crimea and Sevastopol. And yes, indeed, we need to bring back maritime daggers to our officers. Thank you very much. The press conference is over.